So, in response to the last 20 minutes of slightly flying off the handle, what to do? And that's the question, is that all that's yummy, but what now? How do you actually deal with that? Make your way through it, sort it out as best you can. And the answer to that is, I don't know. And I can't tell you. All I can tell you is what has worked for me and people that I've worked with, and what I've observed working around me, and what I've learnt from, looking into, I was going to say history, but that's the wrong word, teachings, I guess, teachings around it. Mostly Gnostic, but, the Gnostics, although they had a very unique take on not just what they thought this was, but how they were dealing with it. Like, the groups based mostly around the Mediterranean, but they weren't the only ones that were trying to work out the best way of dealing with this system. And so the way I do it, and you can take it or leave it, is usually I try and work out why something is happening, which I alluded to in the last video. Why would that abuse be happening? Why that trauma? And you can say, well, that person did it because it was done to them, and that's great, but with your spiritual vision, what's going on? Or that trauma's food. That trauma is creating a food point through suffering and misery. So something is engineering that trauma to happen behind the scenes, whether it happens as an event or whether it happens through human interaction. And so that kind of makes it, impersonal in a way. I mean, it's hugely personal, but it's not personal to me if, how do I put that? It's only as personal to me as if I was milking a cow, is the milking process of the cow personal? No. I didn't single out that cow for any particular reason, except it had the biggest supply of milk. And so that's what I went for. So that's got nothing to do with the cow or its parents or how it was brought up or how it behaves in the paddock. It's all about the milk supply. And so I look at it like that. I'm like, these beings who are engineering this trauma in my life, or have engineered this trauma in my life, they don't give a shit about me, for the most part. They give a shit about whether I can produce misery or suffering or not, and what nodes and key points to hit in me to get the best response or the tastiest response or the highest volume response out of me. It's a farm. You're getting farmed. So the trauma and the suffering and the misery is personal to the person that it's happening to, but it's not personal from the point of why it's done. It's completely impersonal. So it's not, if that happens to me, it's not about me. It's not my fault at all. It's actually completely not my fault for the most part. It's just that I was chosen to get milked. Or if we're talking about trauma as a control point, which is the other side of that, the abused spouse or the child born with terrible whatever, really, really, really not chosen stuff, it's a control point. Why are you needing to be controlled? Well, obviously you're a fucking titan. You've got if you only knew who you were, who you really are, not who you think you are, who you really are, you've probably got a fair bit of juice. And so something somewhere wants to keep you down. Now, this whole setup is why I even got into this, why I even taught myself this and learned how to decipher what I was seeing, how to decipher what I was hearing, how to decipher what I was feeling in myself and in others. Because this whole other exchange and world was going on around me that was for the most part invisible to everyone else and to me some of the time and some of the time not. And I was like, well, what the fuck's that? How do you even explain that to someone, let alone deal with it? And what's it doing? Like, what is happening here? And so it's going on, around you. And some people can see that. They can say, well, I can see the demons in you, or I can see the cords coming off you, or I can, like, whatever the language is. And like anything, like a mechanic, if you drive your car to the mechanic and you look like you're not mechanically minded, there are mechanics who are going to absolutely take you for everything you've got. There are people like that out there. And the spiritual realm, as in the human spiritual realm of talking about this stuff, working in these areas, it's not as bad. It's worse. It's worse than a mechanic's workshop, because you don't know what's going on inside the engine or the gearbox. Otherwise, you would have fixed it yourself. So, I mean, unless you're really good at telling when someone's having a go at you, they'll try and have a go at you because they've got bills to pay for the most part. And the spiritual world, the unseen world, that's bad. There are a lot of people not just selling snake juice, we know that, right? I'm not preaching to the choir, but there's probably no one watching this who doesn't realize that. There's a lot of people selling books, selling Patreons, selling whatever, that are just parroting nonsense that they read in a book somewhere. And it kind of sounds good. And maybe they can see a bit of something. Maybe they can feel a bit of something, and they just go with it. So, if you can't see or hear or feel what's going on, or because I think everyone can. I think that's an innate human ability. It's just our society has us desensitized to it, detuned, and continually makes fun of it and makes fun of any practice that you could do that would tune you back in. It's a very systematic club that they deliberately keep you out of that club of being one who can see or hear or feel, sense what's going on one way or the other. So, you can teach yourself to do that. You can train yourself to do that. You probably can do it in some way or other, but the volume's just turned way down. But you get intuition, you get inspiration, you get feelings, and that's where the spiritual world is operating, in imagination. Which is why the first thing you've got to do if you want to learn about navigating in the spiritual world is you've got to steal your mind back from the fuckers that stole your mind. Because if you haven't ever played in any of this stuff before, and you don't think your mind is already someone else, something else's property, you think again. Because that will just make you dangerous. Because you'll get in there and there'll be blind spots. There'll be massive blind spots. And we've all got blind spots anyway. If you're doing anything in this realm and you're not working on your blind spots every day, you're a liability. And I'm saying that to myself, like that's myself included, absolutely. Daily working on blind spots. Because we all have them, and they all pop up and they keep coming because we're living behind enemy lines. We're in the soup. It's an ongoing thing. And so the way that I have dealt with not feeding the things that are trying to milk misery and suffering from me is I demagnetize the trauma. I don't forget about it. I don't bury it. I don't bring it up and wallow in it. None of that. I just demagnetize it. So when I think about it, it doesn't bring up a response in me, because that response is the thing that gets fed on. Doesn't mean that I don't have a response to it, but it's just that knee jerk. It's that outpouring. That's the juice. It's the first millisecond. That's the food. The 10 minutes, 10 seconds, 10 days of depression or misery or whatever that comes after bringing that trauma back up in you, or having that trauma come back on you again, like in real time, that's not really where the food is. Not from what I've seen and what I've experienced in myself. It's that first bit. That's the gear that they're really after. And so it's, can you have that thing happen? Can you think about that thing happening and not instantly either have any response, right? You want to just be totally neutral about it and just go, oh, there's that thing, right? Not, I fucking hate those bastards that are not love and light. No. Look, it's a horrible thing, but if every time that thing's brought up at you, you have a response, then that thing will keep getting brought up in you, because the unseen things that are around you and in you are feeding off that response. And so, I'm not saying you need to integrate anything. I'm not saying you need to forget anything. I'm not saying you have to process anything. I'm not saying you have to live with anything. I mean, I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'm just saying what has worked for me, because these things that hang around, the less responsive you are to these traumas, the less they hang around you, because you're just not feeding them anymore. And so if you can see them, if you can feel them, you'll notice that there's not as many of them there if you're doing that sort of work. And you notice when you see people, or you're working with people the way that I do, out and about in the community, there are people that have lots of this stuff around them. And there are people that really, even though they've got absolutely shit circumstances, like not good at all, they really don't have a lot of this stuff around them, because they're not feeding them. So, from where I am, it's all about that response. And can you just demagnetize that first initial hit that you get? That's all. So I hope that was helpful to anyone. And we'll talk to you again soon.